Hi everyone, my name is Ben and welcome back to Fancy F1 Tips, your home for the latest news, insights and thoughts on Fancy Formula 1. In this video I'm going to be taking you through my review of the Belgian Grand Prix. I'll share some news, insights and info in advance of this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix, and I'll show you the current plans for my Fancy F1 team. Let's get into it. So let's cast our minds back to the Belgian Grand Prix almost 4 weeks ago. There was a sprint race, plenty of rain, and yet another Verstappen win. Spa was a rough week for my team with a total of 256 points in a sprint week, dropping me from 59th to 156th in the overall rankings. I'm still just 67 points off first place, showing how many close teams there are around the top 100. Let's have a look at the team in more detail. I took a late call to use my autopilot at Spa due to the rain, the sprint race and McLaren's apparent resurgence leaving a few questions. This ended up being ineffective as Verstappen won both the sprint and the race, even with an engine penalty, earning him 68 points, doubled to 136 for my team. Perez earned 27 points in the race, however his contact with Hamilton in the sprint ending his session gave him a negative 20-point hit, leaving him on just 7 points for the weekend. Very unfortunate jeopardy there. Lando Norris managed 15 points from what seemed a difficult weekend for him, beaten by his teammate in the sprint race after getting damage in the qualifying and dropping to the back of the field early on in the race on Sunday, only to come back to 7th once the weather had turned. This could be a worrying sign that Norris and the McLarens aren't as close to the front runners as we thought. However, McLaren made it clear that they had some setup errors, anticipating a wetter race than we got, which caused McLaren and Norris to be slow on the straights. Piastri also had an unfortunate weekend for Fancy F1, despite leading his first ever Formula 1 laps and taking second place in the sprint race. His contact with Sainz on lap 1 of the race on Sunday ended his session, leaving him with negative 7 points for the week. Not the best result for my rank, but his performance on Saturday showed why all the top fantasy teams have him and will most likely keep Piastri past the summer break. Ricciardo I decided to keep so I could have an extra transfer post the summer break. He amassed 7 points with a few overtakes across the weekend. This paled in comparison to Hulkenberg's 13 points, however Hulkenberg benefited from starting both the sprint and the race in 20th due to Haas's odd strategy, giving him more potential opportunities to move up the field. 80 points were gained for Red Bull. I'll be keeping them most likely until the end of the year. And 18 points for McLaren, with difficulties to both Piastri and Norris's weekend as mentioned earlier. I'll most likely keep McLaren unless it's clear that Aston Martin have made more upgrades on Friday. Let's now look at the preview for this weekend's race at Zandvoort. First thing to note for this weekend is the price changes. Sergio Perez has gone down in price by 0.2 million, whilst a number of drivers have increased by 0.5 million this week, including both Haas drivers, Norris, Stroll, Zhou and Albon. This will give managers more budget to work with if you had any of those drivers before the summer break. Now onto the track. Zandvoort, or the Dutch Grand Prix, is known for its roller coaster-like features, including many twists and turns and banked corners. There are a range of low and high speed corners at this track, which makes it hard to judge which teams will suit the track. The Dutch Grand Prix is also historically a track with low overtaking, with just 24 overtakes in each of the last 2 editions. Therefore, qualifying performance will weigh in heavily for this race. Strategy also played a big role last year, with teams differing between a 1 and 2 stop strategy. This means drivers who are good on their tyres could be worth the shot. Think Russell, Albon and Hamilton and avoid Haas where possible. Finally, this week Verstappen can equal Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 race wins in a row at his home Grand Prix. If you were under any doubt, I would not look anywhere other than Verstappen for your turbo driver this week. One thing that has been pervasive in Fancy F1 this season is the existence of a pretty strict template, from triple Red Bull and Aston Martin in the first half of the season to triple Red Bull and McLaren in the past few races. So in today's area of focus, we're going to have a look at how the current template affects managers with different budgets. There may be managers coming back from the summer break needing to wildcards update their teams, and for those thinking of starting F1 Fancy altogether, it's not too late. There are many leagues that only count points from this weekend onwards, which you can compete in if you make a team now. For example, the All to Play For League. The first template we'll look at is starting with my team from Spa. I currently have 117 million budget and can afford the template of triple Red Bull, triple McLaren and one 4.5 million budget driver. This switched from the triple Aston Martin to the triple McLaren before the summer break. Given McLaren are currently fighting for podiums and cost so little compared to their rivals Ferrari and Mercedes, I think this is the best template to have if you have the budget for it. The second team we'll look at is with a 115 million budget. Here you can't afford the triple McLaren, triple Red Bull, and so you have to make a few changes. Let's start with the must-haves. Verstappen, Red Bull and McLaren are the three I wouldn't go without at the moment. I would also pick a 4.5 million or below driver, so that gives you more options with the rest of your team. I would also pick Piastri due to his current superiority over drivers in his price range. This leaves you around 32.5 million for your final two drivers. The obvious pick would be Perez and Alonso. Perez has the fastest car, and whilst Alonso hasn't had a 20 points fancy haul since Austria, I would still back him to get more points across the season than any other driver under 12 million. The alternative option is to have Russell or Sainz instead of Perez, which may give you enough budget to reach Norris as the final driver. This is a risky strategy as Perez is capable of huge points hauls. However, he also falls flat on some weekends, and this is where having Norris could make you up some places. I would only look at this option if McLaren are clearly the second best car, giving Norris the chance of a podium. If you're down near the 110 million total budget, I would follow the same process as 115 million budget of having Verstappen, Red Bull and McLaren to start with. Verstappen with a DRS boost gets too many points to avoid, and the Red Bull and McLaren constructors got more points at Hungary and Silverstone together than all other 8 constructors combined. Again, having Piastri and a 4.5 million budget driver due to their prices leaves 2 slots to fill. The options you can take here are Perez with another budget driver or Norris plus Alonso. If you take another budget driver, I would look at the F1 stats released on Friday evening to find the driver who has the low qualifying pace but high race pace, as budget drivers get most of their points from race positions gained and overtakes. Finally, if you're starting from scratch with a 100 million budget, here are a few tips. As with all of the others, I would recommend a team like this. The Red Bull and McLaren constructors are hard to move away from, as the points differential will significantly outweigh any price differences. Verstappen also gives you an easy DRS option. You then have 2 other strong options with Alonso and Piastri, followed by 2 budget drivers. An extremely risky option would be to remove Verstappen and a budget driver to allow you to afford both Russell and Norris. The issue here is that Verstappen this season has outscored Russell and Norris combined. Therefore, I would only recommend this later in the season if Mercedes, McLaren or any other teams have caught Red Bull and begun winning races. Overall, my recommendation for any budget is to start with the must-haves: Verstappen, Red Bull and McLaren, or Aston Martin if they come back this week or later in the season. I would also include Piastri and then build from there. If you have any favourite drivers you want to fit in, whether it be Leclerc or Albon or anyone else, then you'll have to make some sacrifices somewhere else in the team. Now let's have a look at my team for the Dutch Grand Prix. Verstappen I plan to DRS boost. He's won 8 Grand Prix in a row and there's a very strong chance he makes it 9 this weekend. Perez I'm also keeping. He was unfortunate at Spa due to the damage from Hamilton and I expect him to make a good return to the points this week. Norris and Piastri I intend to keep as well, as I still think McLaren will be top of the budget teams ahead of Aston Martin and Alpine. I will wait to see F1 statistics after practice on Friday before locking them both in. If I were to deviate from this team, I would be more likely to switch Norris to Alonso and keep Piastri. Due to Piastri's price being so low, I can't see any driver around 9 million offering anywhere near as many points. I'm leaving Ricciardo in my team currently as a placeholder. As usual, I will look at the F1 statistics when they're released on Friday evening and assess which budget driver has a poor qualifying pace and okay race pace, indicating that they will move up the field in the race. The budget drivers I can currently afford in this team are Ricciardo, Sargent and Hülkenberg, and I currently predict Ricciardo will be the best of these 3. Red Bull, not much to say here. I think there's a strong chance they will finish 1-2 in the race, bringing the most points out of all the constructors, and also potentially additional points for fastest pit stops. I will also be keeping McLaren unless it becomes extremely clear that Aston Martin are faster. As Aston Martin are cheaper than McLaren, it would be an easy switch to make, and I have 3 free transfers. I think this is unlikely, however, given what we saw in the last 4 races before the summer break. So that's my team for the Dutch Grand Prix. Thanks for watching the video this week. As it's been so long since the last race, additional insights from Friday's practice will be important. So if possible, I would save your transfers until then and also have a look out for F1's practice performance statistics. Let me know your transfer plans for this race week. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to see tips for future F1 races. This has been Fancy F1 Tips, and I'll see you in the next one.